Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, In-Depth Assessment of the Need for Life Cycle Competence in Swedish Industry and Authorities. And during this webinar, we will present results from a research project funded by Adlerbertska Research Foundation. We can take the next slide. My name is Anna Wikström, and I'm working as a project manager at the Swedish Life Cycle Center at Chalmers University of Technology. And I would also like to present my colleague, Julia Liu, who will soon present the results from the project. We can take the next slide. If this is the first time you are attending a Swedish Life Cycle Center event, I would like to take the opportunity to shortly present the center. Swedish Life Cycle Center is a center of excellence and collaboration platform for academia, research institutes, industry, SMEs, and government agencies, and we foster competence building and knowledge exchange in advancing and applying the life cycle field. We can take the next slide. And our vision is to accelerate sustainable transition through science-based life cycle action. And we can take the next slide. And our vision is accelerate sustainable transition. And here you can see all partners in Swedish Life Cycle Center. And the center is hosted by Chalmers University of Technology. And if you're interested of becoming a partner, you're welcome to contact us. We can take the next slide. And here you can see the agenda for the webinar. After this welcoming introduction by me, I will leave the word to my colleague Julia, who will present the results from the project. And after that, we will have a 50-minute long part with questions and dialogue, and the webinar will end at 11 o'clock. And you will get an email with the presentation after this meeting. We can take the next slide. Before I hand over to Julia, I will just give you an introduction to the project. So what we will do during this webinar is to present results from an ongoing research project called In-Depth Assessment of the Need for Life Cycle Competence in Swedish Industry and Authorities. And the aim of the project is to deepen our understanding of the competence needs in relation to life cycle thinking within both Swedish industry and national authorities. And the project is funded by Adlerbertska Research Foundation. We sent out a survey to 33 companies and 16 authorities in May 2024. And the survey was sent to the partners of the Swedish Life Cycle Center and some additional companies working with life cycle perspective, life cycle thinking, and/or LCA. And the survey was also sent to the authorities that the center collaborates with. And it was a survey with 12 questions that took about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. We got 20 answers of 33 companies and 11 answers of 16 from authorities, so a total response rate of 63%. And now, will Julia present the results? And after Julia's presentation, there will be room for questions. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you, Anna. And before we dive into the result, I'd like to briefly explain how the survey was structured. We had in total 11 questions, which were grouped into 3 main parts. First, what the organizations have done so far. Second, their reflections on that work. And third, their thoughts about the future. And in the first part, focused on the life cycle related practices, both current and over the past 5 years. And we wanted to understand what kind of life cycle perspective activities organization has been involved in and what type of analysis studies they've conducted and what their main motivations behind this effort. And we also asked the respondent which standard, guidance, or regulations they consider most relevant to their work. And then the second part is more reflection. And here we want to know how the organizations feel about their use of the life cycle perspective. So we asked, how satisfied are you with the way life cycle perspective is being applied in your organization? And what challenge have you faced? Are there practical barriers? internal organizational issue or maybe a lack of knowledge. And we also asked if they feel there's a shortage of expertise in this area. And if so, what kind of support or solutions would be most helpful? And finally, we look at the future, how the demand for life cycle perspective is expected to be evolved and what competencies will be important to moving forward. So within that, that's how the survey was structured. And with that context in mind, so let's now take a look at what we found. And we start with the life cycle perspective activities. Overall, we can say that industry engaged in life cycle perspective activities more frequently than authorities. And the most common activities reported by the industry, including the conducting or commissioning of LC studies, incorporating LCP, life cycle perspective, into product development, and establishing or maintaining LCP databases for either internal or external use. And in the contrast, authorities tend to focus more on the stakeholder communication, management LCP database, and incorporate LCP in development of national, EU, global regulation or policies. However, their involvement in other LCP activities is generally lower compared to the industry. And now let's look at what motivates the organizations to engage in life cycle related activities. And we asked the participant to choose motivations from a predefined list of reasons why their organization engaged in this kind of activity. And here are the results from the industry side. In addition to that, we also asked respondents to highlight their top 3 motivations. The most frequent selected are these 3. These ones, environmental performance monitoring, aligning with the organization's sustainability goals, gaining competitive advantage, and meeting customer demands. And these findings show that the LCP activities are driven by a mix of internal and external factors. Organizations are motivated both by improving their own operations and by responding to stakeholder or market expectations. And we also asked the participants to rate their satisfaction with how the life cycle perspective is being applied in their organization, and based on the different motivations. And here, this green line is the chart shows that the satisfaction level associated with each motivation. And some key takeaways from this chart, we can say the satisfaction tends to be higher for the top motivations, indicating that when the LCP effort aligns closely with the organization's goal, people feel more positive about the implementation. And however, we see lower satisfaction when it comes to risk management and gain competitive advantage. And here, competitive advantage really stands out. It's a strong motivation, but the satisfaction is lower than expected. This might point to a gap that between the expectations and the actual benefits that they experienced. While motivations such as learning and regulatory compliance are not top motivations, companies reported higher satisfaction in these areas. So the reason behind this could be that many organizations are already mature and experienced in these activities, so implementation tends to go more smoothly and effectively. And now let's look at the motivation and the satisfaction levels for the authorities regarding their use of the life cycle perspective. And the strongest drivers for the authorities is to engage in LCP are alignment with the sustainability goals and the compliance with the instructions, regulatory letters, and government mandates. When it comes to satisfaction, we see a different trend compared to the industry. So satisfaction levels are generally low across most of the motivations. And even for the high priority drives like sustainability alignment and government mandates, satisfaction does not increase very significantly. And one possible explanation is that when the LCP isn't a strong internal drive, its implementation may less developed, and which leads to the lower satisfaction. And this points out to a potential area for improvement. It highlights the needs for explore how the authorities can be better integrate the life cycle thinking or life cycle perspective into their internal processes and increase both engagement and the effectiveness. And now we can explore some key challenges that organizations faced when implementing the life cycle perspective, comparing the findings from the industry and authorities. The left side represents the challenge for industry, and the right side shows the challenges for the authorities. And we start with the common challenges across both sectors. The biggest challenge for both groups is data availability and reliability. And other shared challenges include LC methodology limitations and the difficulties with the integrating life cycle perspective into their internal processes. And in industry, IT infrastructure compatibility stands out. It ranks as the second most significant challenge. And this shows that the system limitations can hinder broader implementation of the life cycle perspective. And for the authorities, a key issue is limited of LC expertise. So to better understand how the organization can overcome the lack of expertise in the life cycle perspective, we asked the participants how they would address this challenge. And here are some key takeaways. Collaboration with experts is the top solution for both industry and authorities. And in industry, there's a strong focus on building internal capacity. Approaches like on-the-job learning, training programs, and keeping up through the news and the media rank very high. And in contrast, authorities tend to rely more on external support, such as consulting or expert partnership, rather than the internal development. And we can find that recruiting new talent is not seen as a primary strategy by either of the group, which may indicate hiring limitations or a preference for upscaling existing staff. And now let's shift our focus on the future and look at how the demand for the life cycle perspective has evolved and how it's expected to change moving forward. We asked the participant to reflect on the past 5 years, and both industry and authorities reported an overall increase in demand for the life cycle perspective. In fact, only one respondent reported a significant decrease. And when asked about the future, both industry and authorities expect the demand for the life cycle perspective to be continue rising. Most respondents fall under the category of the significant increase here in the orange on the chart, and they show a clear trend that life cycle perspectives is becoming more relevant and more necessary across the sector. And if we look at the competencies that will be needed in the future, in general, industry has higher need for competence than the government agencies, and industry identifies a broader range of competencies, both the technical skills and the strategic understanding of the life cycle perspective. And the most frequent mentioned needs including conducting simplified LC, effective communication skills for explaining and interpreting the life cycle perspective related information, a basic understanding of core concepts such as LCA, LCM, or LCT, and life cycle management and life cycle perspective-based policy compliance and reporting. And compared to industry, authorities focus more on developing the ability to enforce regulatory compliance, gaining life cycle perspective knowledge related to the specific materials and processes, and building basic understanding of the core concept. And these differences reflect the distinct role that industry and public agencies play. While industry looking to integrate life cycle perspective into into their operations and strategy, while the authorities focus more on the oversight, compliance, and the policy implementation. And we also asked the open-ended question in the survey. What competencies and skills do you believe are the most in demand to meet upcoming legal requirement or stand or maintain a leading position in the sustainability? And very interesting, one of the most common answers was something that wasn't even on our predefined list. It's scaling up LCA. And this shows that organizations the organizations are looking beyond the traditional LC expertise. They're thinking about how they implemented LC at scale. And in addition to that, respondent also emphasizes that the importance of digitalization, IT solutions, and cross-domain data sharing. They are seen as a critical enablers for applying life cycle perspective in more integrated and scalable way. And for industry, the other two high-valued competencies are effective communication skills for clearly conveying and interpreting the life cycle perspective related information, and also life cycle perspective based policy compliance and reporting. And for authorities, the top priorities are integration of the life cycle management into existing frameworks, as well as a solid basic understanding of the core concept in the life cycle perspective. And this responses pointed to a shift that as sustainability expectation rise, the ability to communication, scale, and integrate LCP become just as important as the technical skills themselves. So to summarize, since this project is aimed at understanding competences need, I'd like to wrap up with some reflections on the competence required for the life cycle perspective. Different roles will have different needs. And some roles clearly required a deep technical LC knowledge. For example, those involved in methodology development, or those who conducting the comprehensive LC studies. And others focus more on the broad application, such as roles dealing with the regulatory compliance, communication, or integrating life cycle perspective into their business processes. As shown in this chart, LCP competence can be seen having two dimensions, the depth of knowledge and the breadth of the application. And this chart is just an illustration, so please don't focus too much on whether each competence is placed in the perfect spot. And we also saw that the competences and the organization's needs are closely tied to the challenges that they face, whether it's data availability, the methodological issues, or integration into the existing processes. And at the same time, motivations like regulatory compliance and achieve sustainability goals and gain competitive advantage, and all the drive the needs for a stronger and a more effective life cycle perspective and skills. So some final reflections. So to truly scale and embed the life cycle perspective, we need a mix of the deep expertise and the broad application. That means the training shouldn't only focus on the technical LC skills, but also on cross-functional collaboration, so both industries and authorities can overcome barriers and make the most of the life cycle perspective. So that's conclude the result of this survey. And I hope you find this insight useful and that they can help to guide future discussions on the life cycle perspective competencies development. Thank you.